Well, hello and welcome to the Last Nighters. We are the Last Nighters, Daniel and Robert, and we are going to talk about the movie The Pursuit of Happyness, and this will be episode 10, and the show notes can be found at lastnighters.com/10. But how you doing, Robert? We're going to get into the Google description in just a moment.
Oh, I'm full and squishy, baby. I'm ready to talk about some movies.
All right. Sounds like a good deal. That's what we're here for. We've done 10 of these on the Last Nighters, and this is a tug at the heartstrings one, so we'll see how many tears get jerked on this. But let's get into the Google description. The Pursuit of Happyness came out in 2006, and it got 8 on the IMDb, 67% Rotten Tomatoes, 95% of Google users like it, and here is the description. Life is a struggle for single father Chris Gardner, played by Will Smith. Evicted from their apartment, he and his young son, Jaden Christopher Cyrus Smith, find themselves alone with no place to go. Even though Chris eventually lands a job as an intern at a prestigious brokerage firm, the position pays no money. The pair must live in shelters and endure many hardships, but Chris refuses to give in to despair as he struggles to create a better life for himself and his son. Came out December 15, 2006, and I think Will Smith got a couple of nods for, at least nominations for Best Actor and things like that. I don't have the box office information here, but I think it did fairly well. It's one of those feel-good Christmas movies that came out at the end of that year. Any qualms with you on that description, Robert?
No, the description is clean, Bob. I remember actually seeing this in theaters, and liking it at the time. My memory actually does stretch that far back. It's now 12 years old, a little long in the tooth. But yeah, this is a strong performer, although I think my co-host didn't find it quite as engaging as I did. I thought that was just kind of surprising me because I thought as a father you would maybe identify with some of the struggles of raising a child, but I guess due to your white privilege you don't have to have any such problems, so life is just ice cream and unicorns for you. Am I right?
Well, yeah, diving save at the end there. I mean, there are plenty of unicorns and ice cream on this side of the microphone. Yeah, this is a movie that just seemed to drag on for me. It's just about 2 hours, and it felt like 4. And it was like this guy just keeps continuing to do dumb stuff and continuing to fail, and he's presented as a very smart guy, and I know in real life he's a super smart guy, but man, was he making a lot of poor decisions.
Yeah, did that bother you? I mean, did you want a more of a Mary Sue character that didn't really make any mistakes? Because generally, if you have a protagonist, you want them to make a couple of mistakes so that they can learn from them and grow as a person.
Well, it was just frustrating to see it. And I suppose I'm looking at it with a bit of a jaded lens because I'm looking at it, right? I'm throwing the puns out there just like I did with the Cars episode. There were probably like 18 Cars puns in episode 9. But I'm looking at it, from an observer's view. And from I'm trying to be entrepreneurial, and I'm studying Austrian economics and trying to gain an understanding on all of these types of things, and then to watch a movie where he's making obvious mistakes, at least obvious to me, though I'm sure in the situation it's not so obvious, right? I mean, it's always easier to give advice to another because you're seeing a window of the situation, and you can offer that advice on that. But when you're actually in it, and there's so many different tacit angles on it, and little portions, you can get very confused and lost and muddy within it when you're making your own way through problems like this.
Okay, so outside of, there's one major mistake. I wouldn't even say it's major, but it was, pretty big to him, and it's a big point of the movie. And he even admits that it's stupid. He calls it stupid right when it happens. But yeah, I mean, even at the time, when he originally starts thinking about it, even before the bad thing happens, you're going, why would you do that? Why in the world would you trust your livelihood and your property to a hippie? But other than that, what mistakes are you talking about here? I mean, a lot of it for me was some misfortune, one really dumb mistake given the scanner to the hippie. But then, he didn't have anything to do with the IRS coming and jacking his money out of his bank account. I mean,
he certainly did.
Okay, go ahead.
He didn't pay tribute to them. He didn't grovel before them and pay them. And so there were consequences to that. One of the early consequences on the way up to the escalation path that they have if you don't pay.
So wait a minute. So you are essentially victim blaming here, sir. You're saying that because he didn't pay some thugs some protection money or whatever, some hush money or just whatever they claim is their cut, it's stupid of him to think that he can keep his own money? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that if you don't pay the protection money, then don't expect the protection.
From themselves?
Right.
From the people?
Yeah, they're saying if you pay us, we won't mess with you as much.
Right. So you think he's obligated to pay them?
No, I'm saying there are consequences to not paying them. I'm not saying it's correct or moral. I'm saying that it's a well-known thing, and he didn't even act as if he was aware of it. And maybe he wasn't. But I'm just saying it was another thing that he did or failed to do that ended up having consequences for him.
Well, no, he was aware. In the very beginning of the movie, he says, I'm going to take care of this. I got to file an extension with the IRS. And then his wife is upset and worried about it. But then he doesn't. But you're saying that it was a stupid mistake and you didn't like the main character because of all these dumb mistakes?
He made lots of mistakes. Not just trusting the hippie with these bone density scanners, but the fact that he bought the bone density scanners to begin with was a poor move. Not the initial, the idea, like you and I, we have a mutual friend, and he tends to get excited about a project and throw everything he has at it.
Yeah.
And the Chris Gardner character does that in this movie, and then they don't sell, right? Or they sell very, very slowly. And he's sunk his life savings into it. His wife is working as like a hotel maid or whatever. Yet they're not able to pay the rent and pay the the extortion fees from the taxes and the parking tickets and all of these things. And I just got to question, why throw all of your eggs in one basket into something, and then if they're not able to sell, why not adjust your price? Market's clear, right? Or focus on something else, right? Like cut your losses. I mean, it's not just that he's thrown his money into it, but he's beating the street trying to hawk these things, and he could be doing something else productive to bring money in to pay the rent, pay the extortion fees, pay the other extortion fees. And side note, where was the wife's money going? Because she said she's working like double shifts and, working way too much, and yet they're not paying the rent.
Well, from what I saw of the movie, she had a bit of a drug problem. They make an allusion to that. I mean, it's never overtly shown, but she had some problems in that regard. I mean, at one point, when she wants to leave, he's like, you're not going to take my son. You can't take care of him. And I think there were some other things that there was an allusion to her having issues with her not being able, being some sort of a fit parent or something like that. But you're right. I mean, that's never really shown in the movie. So where exactly it was all going to, other than living expenses, we don't really know.
Right, and she had cigarettes, at least, and I mean, I'm sure they were much cheaper back in the early 80s, but it's still, it's making choices here, right? Like, what's more important to you, cigarettes or paying your rent? I mean, they've got this 5-year-old kid, and you would think that having a home for them would, be higher up on their marginal utility scale here. And they're speaking of marginal utility, the kid, Jaden, I forget his name in the movie, but he talks about making a list that is of things he would like for his birthday and trying to prioritize which one thing he would want more than anything else. And I thought that's a great lesson in marginal utility. You're giving an ordinal scale of what's most important to you, and you're putting the one thing at the top that you would want, and you're foregoing all the others. And if only the parents would have done the same, they would have avoided a lot of this heartache and headache.
Well, so you're not really sympathetic to these young parents and their trials and tribulations, because this really movie isn't so much about like a character arc. This is more of just a guy who's really struggling to make it, so to speak, and all the things he has to deal with to finally succeed. You didn't really find any kind of sympathy for him. Is that what you're saying?
No, I was just mostly frustrated by his lack of making better decisions, better choices. Because they show him as a very smart guy. And I guess that's another side of it, like, why is this smart guy doing such dumb stuff?
Well, I mean, I think people are very intelligent in different ways. In the movie, he was presented as a very math smart, kind of a bookish smart guy, but maybe not such a street smart guy. I mean, he's also he's a dreamer. And, while his wife is far more practical, he's like, well, I'm going to get this internship at Dean Witter. And she's like, internship? What does that pay? And he's like, nothing. And she's like, that's a dumb idea. Why would you ever do that? And he's like, because it's a stepping stone to a better life and a greater path and success and to happiness. And she's just like, stupid. I'm not going to support you in that. I'm out of here. And I mean, for the movie, for me, it was about, chasing your dream. And don't let anybody get in the way of it. And if you want something in life, go out and get it. And work as hard as it takes to get that and to succeed in whatever it is. I mean, the whole movie is about the pursuit of happiness, and whatever happiness is for you, to go out and take it and work hard for it. And I found a ton of sympathy for the guy in that.
Well, that's good. Good for you. I did see some redemption at the end. He did struggle a lot, and it did pay off for him, but he did put his kid through a lot of unnecessary stuff.
Okay, so are you telling me that he was becoming an intern at Dean Witter was a bad move to make?
No, not moving on from the bone density scanners, continuing to live in the house where he was paying double the rent that he would have paid just 2 blocks away. Even the landlord was telling him, why do you continue to live here when you're not even paying me rent, but you could probably afford this other place down the block that's like half as much.
Right,
So
but
he's
we're never shown that other place. Could have
no,
been
we
way
are shown
worse
that other place.
with
We're
crime.
shown it. We're shown it. He moves to it. It's the motel.
That's what he was talking about? He talked about the hotel?
I think so, yeah. And so the other thing about this guy was he was stealing constantly, like all over the place. He was stealing rent at the house or the apartment. He was stealing motel fees. He was stealing cab rides.
Yeah.
Do you not have any problem with any of that? I mean, it seemed to me like he was just going around stiffing people because of his poor decisions.
Okay, so what about these? I agree that those, stealing these things is not great. I'm not going to defend his decisions, even though he, whatever, had like noble goals or whatever, like he was, supporting his child and trying to get a better life for himself. It doesn't excuse what he did. But what would a better decision have been?
A better decision?
Yeah, I mean, you're saying these are all bad decisions. What decisions would you rather he have made?
Cut your losses on the bone density scanners. Do something actually productive. Don't live beyond your means. Don't live in a place that you can't even afford the rent, especially when it's made clear in the movie that there is a place that is an alternative that is half the price. What else?
So what would you rather he have done? Just taken the loss on the bone density scanners, just throw them in the garbage or something, right?
Or reduce
Instead
your price.
Instead of trying to go out and sell them on the weekends, right? That was a waste of time, according to you.
No. That was going to be his job, and he was failing at it, right? And only when he got this internship did he do it weekends only. And he had six left. And when he first bought them, what did he have, like 40? And he did sell them all. It's just it took him too long, right? So he was eating away the proceeds.
Yeah, so what should have done? Throw them in the garbage and then get a job? Get some other job?
Well, I've already made it clear that he should have moved into the cheaper place, and he should have done something actually productive rather than try to sell these things that aren't selling.
Right, like what?
I don't know. You can always get a job in an unhampered free market.
Right,
he should have gone out and got a job.
Chuck them in the garbage and then go get a job flipping burgers or something. That's what you're saying?
or not even throw them in the garbage, but do a similar thing to what he did, in that go and get a productive job and then try to sell these things on the weekend.
Well, that's what he did.
No, he got an internship, an unpaid internship, that at the end of 6 months he had an opportunity to maybe have a job.
Right. So you disagree with his path. You don't think he should have done the internship thing.
I think that he should have made better decisions well before the internship thing even came about. He was already in a deep hole.
Okay, fine, but should he have gone into the internship or not at the time in which he did it?
I wouldn't have. I mean, it worked out for him, but I think it was probably not the prudent decision to make at the time.
So it was overly risky for you.
He was already not able to pay rent. He was already not able to put a roof over his child's head.
Correct. They were living in a shelter at that point, after they got kicked out of the hotel.
Right. But he had accepted the internship prior to that.
Yes. Because he had counted on being able to sell off the rest of the scanners to be able to fund his internship.
And? And what's your point?
I'm saying he had a plan.
Not a very good one.
He had a plan that was working. He didn't count on the IRS stealing his money.
Right. Which was terrible, but it was preventable.
Preventable.
Yes, it was preventable.
How can you prevent the IRS from stealing your money, Daniel? Please tell me. I'm sure everybody wants to know.
He could have actually done the extension and paid the amount that they demanded of him at
That's
the time.
the same thing.
No, there were fees and late charges and whatnot. And they extracted the money from his accounts directly without his knowledge or consent.
Right.
Yeah.
When did they require anybody's consent?
No, you're missing the point. He could have handled it well ahead of time had he been making better decisions. Had he actually gone out and done something productive, he would have had the money that they demanded earlier, and he would have been able to pay his rent and live in a cheaper place and be able to afford to keep a roof over his kid's head. He had already been evicted from his apartment when he decided that he was going to live in this motel and sell the last 6 scanners during the internship. He was already digging a very deep hole for himself.
He was taking a huge risk. I agree. He was taking a huge risk, a long shot payoff. And it ended up working out for him. But it was a long shot. So you think he's just like a bad parent?
Yes, he's a terrible parent.
Okay. Interesting. I did not see. I saw a guy who struggled to provide for his family, who cared about his child so much that he was willing to go through all that to hopefully provide a better life for him and his child. And yeah, he took a lot of risks, but you need to take risks in life or else there's no big reward. Entrepreneurial risk is why they deserve the returns they get. You're saying you're very much on board with the mother. Hey, let's do something very practical here. Forget your dreams. Forget any kind of desire for happiness. Screw that. Forget it. And just get some job you hate.
No, I think the mother was terrible too. In fact, she was probably worse. No, listen. You got the mother, right? All she does is bitch at Will Smith. That's all she does. She works all these hours and has zero money, doesn't pay the rent, and then is more than willing to just give up her kid.
She wasn't happy about it, but yeah.
That's not Mother of the Year, man.
Oh, I believe you. I agree. I thought that a lot of mothers, a lot of people that, a lot of marriages that end in divorce feature, people that just, quote, aren't happy. I'm just not happy. And so she left. Well, I'm sorry, but like the movie says, life is about the pursuit of happiness, not necessarily the attainment of happiness. But, she bailed. And, yeah, she left. I didn't find any sympathy with her character.
No, in fact, I thought that the exchange she was making of this fleeting happiness of maybe getting a job in New York at her cousin's boyfriend's restaurant at the price of giving up her kid and her husband, how could that make you happier? It seems bizarre. It seems like her entire value scale is totally out of whack.
Well, she chose it. That was her preference. So obviously there's, it's a movie. It's a reductive thing. It's not going to tell you the whole story. It's all told from his perspective. So maybe there's something we don't know that factored into her decision. Maybe he didn't approve of her drug use, and she wanted to get away from that.
I don't know where you're getting the drug use thing. I didn't see any of that.
Are you kidding me? She looks strung out the whole movie.
That's just what she looks like, man.
Okay, she looks strung out, dude.
I mean, did we watch the same movie? I feel like this is our Lion King discussion.
Yeah, this is very much our Lion King discussion again, where I'm right and you're wrong. It's fine. It's not a big deal.
You're filling in all these made up gaps. I mean, I suppose it would make sense that she cares more about the drugs than her family, and that she's willing to go to New York, to have her drug habit or something.
Well, why does Will Smith tell her that she can't raise their son?
Because she has no earning potential. She's a hotel cleaning lady, and she's maybe going to get a job as a waitress in a restaurant. Maybe.
Okay, and you don't think that that's enough to raise a kid?
I think that was his point, that he was saying that she can't provide for the kid.
Yeah, I think that's a stretch. That's possibly part of it.
The drug thing's not a stretch. The drug thing is totally a stretch. You can't make enough money to take care of the kid is essentially what he says in the movie.
I don't think that that's the point he makes. I don't think that the point is that you can't financially support the kid. I think he's saying that you can't take care of the kid. And there's a difference there. That's financially is part of it, maybe, in the sense that, yeah, you also have all these other things you like to spend your money on.
All right.
I grant you that there's no overt scene where she's shooting smack or whatever. But it's a weird thing for him to say that you can't take care of our kid when it's just that, because you work in a hotel or something. That's ridiculous. Who would say that?
Will Smith.
There are plenty of hotel chambermaid people that have families.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they should have given her a bit more of a reason why. Because it's not clear in the movie.
You're right. It's not clear in the movie.
Though there are clearly money problems within their relationship, and that of course leads to relationship problems.
You're not kidding. It's one of the hugest reasons for divorce or issues in any kind of relationship.
And every time that he interacts with her, like prior to the separation, she is totally awful to him. Like, not supportive in any way. In the flashback where they buy these bone density scanners, she's super excited about it as well, right? They show her helping to offload them and put them into their apartment and take the picture together, and like she's all excited and ecstatic. So, I mean, it's clear to me that she was like good to go on this thing initially. But then I think she soured on, when they weren't selling. And that's what I don't...
Which is where you would be.
Well, yeah, but I would have been like, all right, well, let's do something else that's actually going to bring in money in the meantime, because this isn't working out. We're not even paying our rent. Like, it's time to make some decisions here. Not just stiff our landlord.
Well, he starts making money. He starts selling them right before the IRS steals his money. He's got money in his bank account. He's feeling good. He's paying his rent. That's
way, way down the path, man. He'd already been evicted. He's already living in the motel. His wife already left.
Right.
I'm talking about way upstream. You got to start making some changes there. Now, what do you think their plan was with these bone density scanners? Because he did sell them all eventually, right? So he had recouped his investment and then some, because he didn't appear to be lowering the price. Like, he was like, they're $250. They're $250, and that's what he was selling them for. Right. So he got all of his money back plus the profit, Do you think that his plan was that they were going to sell like hotcakes and that he would re-up and keep buying them and it would be like a viable business?
You can only assume that that was what his plan was. But yeah, I mean, when he started relying on, one sale a month to pay for groceries or whatever, then yeah, I can imagine he changed his tune about the possibility of re-upping.
Right. And then it was just a matter of, right, let's sell these out and do something else, and that's when this internship becomes something that, I mean, he wants to do the internship because he sees the guy park in front of the stock exchange or whatever with a Ferrari, right? He's like, I want to do whatever it is you do because you look super happy and super rich.
Yeah, and everybody walking out of the stock exchange building was looking happy. The stockbroker building or whatever, the Dean Witter building or whatever it was just looking happy. And it might have been his, perspective on things. I'm sure not everybody walking out of any one building is just all smiles all the time. But
I mean, it was the 80s, right? So it's like everyone's like all coked out and.
Well, that's what I was thinking, right? When I first saw that scene, I was like, everybody's high on cocaine. That's why everybody's looking happy. I mean, if you see The Wolf of Wall Street and then you watch this movie, you're like, oh, okay, that's what's going on.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense now.
Yeah.
All right, so let's shift topic a little bit because we've been going quite a bit on my hate of this movie and your feeling for the guy. Let's focus let's give into our hate and focus on the government interfering with his pursuit of happiness. One, they continuously give him tickets for his parking, and then they eventually steal his car, and then, in a moment that I thought was related to his demanding that the kid be with him, the cops show up at the apartment to take him away. And I thought, oh, well, this must be because the wife said, oh, he has my son and, whatever. Because generally speaking, at least in today's environment, the law enforcement sides with the female in a custody dispute, probably, 90% of the time? I'm just throwing a number out there.
You got to be a really messed up mom for the court to not award you the kid. Absolutely, especially since the state is the father and pays for all the support. So a woman can just take the kids and get on welfare, and you're totally fine. You don't have to show that you can even financially support a kid. You just have to be not addicted to smack and work in the streets and whatever, and then you'll get
all right.
the kid.
So this is playing.
Hey, not to paint in too broad a brush, but that's generally what happens.
Right, all right. So this is actually supporting your drug theory here. But no, the cops aren't there for that because they had just had the son is coming with me thing. No, they're there for the parking tickets. They want that parking ticket money. And so they take him down to the station.
Parking ticket money.
Yeah, they take him down, and he writes him a check. This is all the money I have, but I'll settle up with you guys. And, here's the check. I got to go get my son now. And they're like, oh, no. You got to stay overnight. Because we got to make sure this check clears. That made me so mad. I cannot tell you. I mean, that's like lack of due process. That's lack of, presumption of innocence. That's incarcerating someone, holding them against their will. I mean, the litany of things that I want to hate on right now are ridiculous, and I'll just pass it to you for now.
Well, if this was a completely private property situation and parking tickets were a completely voluntary thing, I mean, it is essentially voluntary, but it's the city government essentially claiming ownership over the parking, the sides of the streets and that sort of thing. So if it was just like, the building owner, and then they had a certain number of parking spots, and then they charged I'd be totally fine with that. That's fine. But I do take umbrage with a government just declaring that they own these spaces. And you could argue that, yeah, they make the roads, but we could go down that whole rabbit trail. I don't need to necessarily crack open that can of worms. But, yeah, so they declare that they own these spots and that, but to go with your argument of, hey, you need to pay off it's stupid not to pay these overlords off to not harass you. Wasn't it? I mean, you didn't give him a pass for the taxes, but now you're upset about the parking tickets. It seems like the same kind of deal. If he had just paid these, I mean, at one point he's parking a car for his boss, and he goes to put money in the thingamajig, in the meter, and he digs around in his pocket. He can't find any coins, and then he just takes off instead of paying it because he had to make a meeting for to make essentially what turns out to be the thing that saves him, the football game and that contact that gets him all the business from all those people that eventually earns him his spot. But I'm curious. I mean, I'm upset about the kidnapping as well. The fact that these people would just kidnap him and hold him overnight when he has to go get his kid and whatever. Of course, it's all false imprisonment, kidnapping, that sort of thing. But to go with your argument against taxes, wasn't it stupid not to pay the meters and all that stuff? And I don't have any knowledge about how terrible it is parking in downtown San Francisco. I can imagine it's terrible. Parking, if it's anything like parking in downtown Seattle, it's a nightmare. So, but anyway, Daniel, to your point there.
Yeah, it was stupid of him to not have paid these off initially as additional protection money. Though I think it was probably, I mean, not paying your parking tickets is kind of in my cultural memory, like as a normal thing referred to in television shows and movies, like, oh, no one pays parking tickets or something. But I think that he should have been, taking care of these things that could affect him when he had the chance to do it. And that doesn't excuse the fact that once he did pay it, that they then imprison him because, it needs to clear the next day. And it's, I kind of understand because, checks bounce and all of this, but, then just go get him again or whatever.
Right.
But, don't, totally screw this guy up. I mean, he's got his kid that he's got to deal with. I don't know. It seemed... All right, so I think he could have avoided it, but they went way too far in the situation.
Fair enough. I mean, I don't count on the government doing anything properly or morally, so I would agree with that. Do you have any issues with the entire, the claiming of, one of the points that he made in the beginning when he shows, his car getting towed and all the tickets on it, he's like, didn't he say something about always being in a hurry in order to sell these things or something like that, because he always parks in, hospitals because he's always selling to hospitals? I don't know. I feel like there's something we could say about that, but I'm not sure. Because I don't know what it's like to park in San Francisco, but I imagine it's terrible.
Yeah, I don't know. I imagine that it's one of those deals where if you need parking, it's hard to find. I mean, especially around hospitals. I mean, I used to live near a hospital in Seattle, and parking was pretty tough around there. But I think that he just was struggling to sell these things, and so he was just trying to make more and more appointments. to try to make these sales, and he wasn't able to plan accordingly to be able to ensure that he had an opportunity to get parking.
Yeah, it is a lot of conjecture and whatnot we have to go through here because we're not given the whole story, of course, and we only have his perspective. I don't know. If I was a hospital owner, I mean, I would want, spots available for emergency situations. I don't know if that's the case. You want certain spots available for visitors. You want spots available for staff. And if a car is parked improperly, you have every right to, move it and get it towed. I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for him on that situation. Like you said, he's struggling to sell these things. Maybe he could have been doing a better job. I don't know. We don't have the whole story here.
Yeah, and one last note on deciding to sell these things. He has to lug this probably heavy device. It's very cumbersome around with him all the time, and I got to imagine that would be enough to tell him to not do this anymore.
No way, man! You got those guns. It's looking good.
Yeah. Well, this is right after Ali, right? He did the Ali movie. Oh, this is 5 years later. But anyway,
I don't know.
Let's get into the tears jerk, because it sounds like there's a lot of tears jerk for you. There was a moment that really hit me, and that was that he grew up fatherless, and so he wanted to make a point to do the exact opposite of how he was raised, and he wanted to be there for his kid. And that hit me in the feels a bit. And then also there was a moment that somebody had made a comment on Facebook about very touching moments in movies, just in general. And this movie was brought up, and they said that it was very emotional, elicitation of tears when he was pretending that they were traveling in time and seeing dinosaurs, and then they went into the men's room in the BART station and went to sleep as like a camp out, and he's like sitting there crying while someone's trying to get into the bathroom. So a fair number of tears jerked on that. How about for you?
Yeah, the scene you just described was fairly strong for me. Quite a number of tears. And then there's a later scene which, if you're a child of divorce, it's kind of an easy get. Like anytime a kid asks a parent, why did mom leave? Or, why did so-and-so, was I not good enough? That hits me right in the feels, because that's something that happened to me personally as a kid. And having those feelings of, why did someone not love me enough? Was I not good enough? That hits me really hard. And then at the very end, when he's gone through this whole trials and tribulations and just, struggled, tried so hard, when the boss guy says, wear a shirt tomorrow, that was good. And Will Smith starts tearing up right there in the movie, and so did I. And so, yeah, this was a strong emotional movie for me. I suppose it would be less so if you just hated these characters and thought that they were stupid and making dumb mistakes. But I felt more sympathy for these characters. And, as a matter of course, I felt more emotion when they succeeded or failed or whatever they were feeling. So I thought it was a well-written movie.
All right, so how many tears jerked from you, sir?
Oh, this is a strong emotional. I would say this is end up in the 7.5 range from 1 to 10. There are movies where I'm just a blubbering mess, and this isn't quite one of them. But for those emotional scenes, there's a pretty strong reaction from me.
Okay, it was hit or miss for me. I'm going to go with maybe a 5 in the middle, because there were the moments that we discussed and a few that you just brought up that were certainly emotional, but yeah, just my disdain for the endless calamity of the consequences of his poor decisions made the movie just drag on for me and seem extremely long. And speaking of extremely long, that's what she said, we're almost to an hour already, so we need to start winding this thing down. But there were some other things I wanted to talk about. One was the attempt to go to the women's shelter when he first gets evicted from the hotel, and he gets discriminated against because it's for women and children. And that's where he learns about the men's shelter. But I thought that was kind of interesting.
Certainly.
You want to talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, and I did a quick search looking for some numbers, but I couldn't find any. I know that they're out there. If you watch any number of MRA-type videos, they'll talk about, you know, the discrepancy between women's shelters to men's shelters. And if this movie is any indication, there was no long line outside of the women's shelter, the women and children's shelter. And it's probably due to the fact that there are, I forget what it is, but it's something like 20 to 1 or 30 to 1 or I don't know, but it's a massive discrepancy towards women and children. And, you know, it's probably due to the majority view from the people that fund those things. I imagine it's not all public funds. I imagine a fair amount of it is like private charities that fund those things. And they see, you know, women and children being more vulnerable. And as a matter of that, you know, the majority of homeless are men. It's something like 94% or something like that. 95% is men, male homeless. And yeah, it's a massive long line for the one male shelter in town. And yeah, he had to get there at a certain time in order to try and get in because, you know, they can only take so many. But yeah, they, and I have no problem with the discrimination. You know, if you are a private donor and you want to say, hey, this money only goes towards women and children, you only let in women and children, that's your business, that's fine. If it's public funds, though, however, that's a more interesting topic where, you know, they're going to just openly discriminate against men who are obviously in need of shelter. And then they're just like, well, no, hit the bricks, buddy. You're a dude. You have a penis, so get out of here because clearly you can fend for yourself because we offer so many things for men and not for women. But, you know, we don't know. In this movie, you're not given all that backstory and information. So all I can really say is just the obvious lack of support for men in this movie and in reality for male homeless people. Not that it's any one particular person's fault. I mean, if you're a private donor, like I said, and you want to only, you know, support women and children, that's your business, and I got no problem with that. But if, you know, you're a government and you claim to care about your citizens and you're all about equality, but yet you only support the women and children of your citizens, well, I would question why that is.
Yeah, it seems a little hypocritical, but that is also par for the course when it comes to how governments tend to operate. You know, the bill has a nice and shiny name about what its intended purpose is, and then the results are, generally speaking, the exact opposite. And the means of funding are, of course, immoral and all the rest. A lot of unintended consequences and moral hazard and incentives and seen and unseen issues going on there. But we do need to start winding this one down. I do want to, before we get into our final summary and review, bring up one last issue, and it was another mistake that Will had made, is that he got into a fight with his friend over the $14 and burned that bridge. And so then when he was evicted from his motel, he had nowhere to go. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, because had he not insisted on the $14, then he probably would have had a place to stay that night.
Yeah, I mean, we could argue that he was an asshole and that he hadn't developed the interpersonal relationship support network that most people develop by the time they're his age, where they can, you can go to them for help. I mean, we didn't see Will Smith's mother in this movie. I mean, apparently he met his father when he was 28, I think he said. But apparently he has, parents that he could have sought help from, or relatives of any kind, brothers, sisters. I mean, all we're giving is this one guy who owes him $14, which is kind of strange. I mean, he did say that he was from what? He grew up in, like, Alabama or something like that, or Arkansas or Louisiana?
Yeah, something like that,
and then he moved out to San Francisco, I guess, with the Navy, I assume, because he said he was in the Navy. Maybe he had some Navy buddies. I don't know. But, yeah, it's weird that he wouldn't have any kind of really support group structure at this point, that they don't really have any friends that they could rely on, even for like a couch to crash on or something. I never thought that he had made a mistake with that $14 guy. But now that you bring that up, yeah, maybe he did in real life. Maybe he did have those supports, but he just too proud, and he didn't want to, rely on those kind of things. I don't know. You also don't see him applying for welfare or anything like that.
Yeah, I do applaud that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And the $14 thing, I mean, it's similar with the wife, right? Like, money problems create relationship problems. And so $14, even back in the 80s when it was actually worth something, probably not a huge deal until you really need every dollar, right? Like, when the head of the firm was like, oh, do you have $5 for this cab ride? I don't have time to go grab my wallet. And he's like, here you go, even though he can't afford it.
Right.
But, when you're down to the dregs, down to the moths that are flying out of your wallet, I guess that $14 was more than $14, right, to him? Like, on his marginal utility, like, that was all the money he had claimed to, and this guy was, like, not giving it to him, which, kind of a dick thing. But he also then burnt that bridge as a result, and that ended up costing him a potential place to stay. Hard to know that, of course, but anyway.
Yeah.
Let's get into the final summary and review. I'll let you go first, and then we will end this show of The Last Nighters. It can be found at lastnighters.com/10, show notes and more.
Well, as you could tell from the episode, I really like this movie. I think it has a strong emotional core. It doesn't really have an arc for the main character so much. Like, he makes, just your basic trials and tribulation type mistakes. And he sort of learns from them, sort of not. He's taking a big risk to, hopefully pay off. Maybe it's not the smartest thing in the world, but he's a human being, and we all do dumb things, and maybe we're, don't have the smartest tact. I can definitely identify with him on that. I'm going for, a very kind of lucrative, high risk, low chance of paying off type thing as well. So I identify on that level. It's not your typical, like I said, character with an arc. It's more of just a struggle for that character. So the movie is banking on you identifying with the character and their troubles in order to establish likability and emotional connection and that sort of thing. But I think it had a good message. Do what it takes to achieve your dream. What is life if not the pursuit of happiness? So for me, this is a strong 8, despite its, maybe some of the more questionable decisions that the characters make. But if the characters just go through and make all perfect decisions, there's no movie. You need characters to make mistakes in order for there to be any interesting thing happen ever. So nobody's interested to watch a movie about perfect people doing perfect things perfectly. So, good movie. Check it out. All
right. Well, I kind of went into it sort of thinking that, oh, this might be a little bit like Founder, like entrepreneurial and some lessons to take from it. And in a way, it was, but not in the way I had thought in remembering this movie before watching it again. I did get a lot of takeaways, and that is mostly in things to not do and things to avoid. The bone density scanners, I think, was, I applaud him for taking that entrepreneurial risk and getting excited about something, but he apparently didn't do his due diligence and see if there was a market for these things. He didn't adjust to that market. He didn't take any steps to make sure that he was covering his obligations in the meantime. Rent, the parking tickets he was getting, the IRS extortion that he was being demanded to be paid. And so those were some mistakes that he had his value scale kind of like thrown off, right? He wasn't taking care of the most important stuff. He was focusing, I think, in my opinion, too much on this big payoff that wasn't really going to come. Like the bone density scanner thing just was not working out. And it's, the market is fickle, right? You have to satisfy the desires of consumers. And he took an entrepreneurial risk and he failed. Even though he ended up selling them all, it took him way too long, and he ate through all of his whatever profits he had made just in whatever expenses he was actually paying, when he wasn't stealing cab rides or stealing rent or stealing hotel rate fees or lying about why he's in certain neighborhoods. I mean, he just goes on and on doing like just terrible things throughout this whole movie, and it's just calamity after calamity. Though he does have that dream, right, that vision, that once he discovers what he wants to do, he does go after it, and he doesn't let anything get in the way, even taking care of his kid, making sure that there's a roof over his head. So, I don't know, maybe there's some like problems with this guy. He does clearly care for his son in the emotional sense, but not in the physical needs kind of way, like food, shelter, etc. So I had a lot of problems with this movie. I'm going to give it like a 3.5. Not one of my favorite movies. So that's where I'm going to leave it. And Robert and I disagree big time on this one.
Will Smith believed in himself, and he chased his dream believing in himself when no one else would. And I think that's a important lesson to be learned. Daniel did not believe in Will Smith or his abilities.
Yeah, he was just he was spinning his wheels with that thing, and he needed to cut his losses. But I do agree with the final message, and that is if you see something that you want, you go and work your ass off and you go and achieve it. And so that is a positive lesson I can take out of this, the Pursuit of Happyness, the 10th episode of The Last Nighters, and you can find this at lastnighters.com/10. Any final words before we play our outro music, Robert?
No. Thanks for listening, everybody. It's been an honor and a privilege. You are some very attractive, good-looking people from where I sit. Have a sexy, sexy evening.
All right, everyone, and good night from last night. Here we are, lastnighters.com/10.